Chaim Alevsky here. Today is Hey Teves, special day in the Jewish calendar. Last night at the Ohel, while visiting, I heard these words from the Rebbe's video. A Jew's mission is to illuminate the world and warm up his or her environment with the light of Torah and mitzvahs. Learn more about Hey Teves on Chabad.org, but in a nutshell, it was a spiritual victory in a federal court in 1987, demonstrating that the Rebbe belongs to the Jewish people, that he really had no life of his own, and his whole being was there to serve us. And we try to emulate that, everyone in their own way. Chanukah is over, but can't take Chanukah away from me. I'm still living with some of the beautiful teachings I learned, and one of them is from Tafshin Membeis, 1982, on Shabbos Chanukah. The Rebbe spoke about a somewhat startling observation. You know, the Rebbe may have been, or arguably was, the most mindful person in our generation. There's a lot of talk about mindfulness in the world. Be present, the power of now, be here, be focused, center yourself. Anybody ever meeting with the Rebbe always came back with this feeling and expressed it, articulated it, that that person felt there was no one else in the world present on the Rebbe's mind. There's nothing else in the world besides for the person standing in front of the Rebbe. So the Rebbe was definitely the epitome of mindfulness in that sense. In this new teaching I just learned, there might be an additional perspective, something that's maybe a little bit different. So the Rebbe asks the question about the menorah. We all lit the menorah now for 8 days of Hanukkah. The Rebbe asks, on the first night of Hanukkah, you have a menorah. It's got 8 branches. It's got 8 placeholders, 8 lamps or 8 candles, and you only light one. And then you look down at the menorah, which looks something like this over here, and you see only one is lit and the rest are dark. Sounds a bit depressing, doesn't it? Why not just put one candle there and just have, even forget the menorah, just have one candle or one lamp on the first night, 2 lamps on the second, 3 on the third. Why is it that we're looking down as we illuminate a little bit of that menorah? We're looking down and we see a lot of darkness and emptiness. Says the Rebbe that the Baal Shem Tov taught, everything we experience or see in our life is a lesson for us in our service of God. Because everything we do is God-centered. And here too we have a beautiful lesson. The Rebbe says that the lesson is both vertically and horizontally. Vertically, it says we have Torah to study, we have mitzvah to do, we have observance, we have Shabbos, tefillin, kosher, between man to God. And, you know, today we do the best we can do. But the lesson of the menorah is always to add more light, right? Tomorrow you're going to do better. Says the Rebbe, while we're doing today's best, we see the empty lights ahead of us. We see that tomorrow will be better. So in our mind, in our consciousness, there needs to be an awareness that although I'm doing the best I could do today, tomorrow will still be better. Beat that. That's a beautiful thought. And that was vertically. The Rebbe says that also horizontally. Interestingly, where, and this is really kind of, in a sense, it contradicts the mindfulness idea, but you can decide on your own. The Rebbe says when you're working on Chanukah and you're doing your best illuminating the darkness of Chanukah, of the world through Chanukah, in your mind's eye, you know there's another holiday coming up. Purim is going to be there soon. And we're going to have to delve in and dive into Purim soon too. And the same thing with all the mitzvot. The Rebbe says because we're limited human beings, although our focus, our life is God-centered and service-centered, we can't do everything all at once. So we know that it'll be kind of spread out over time and over depth. So this is a beautiful lesson from seeing those empty lights ahead of us, not in a negative way, just knowing that we're going to fill those spaces with light, both vertically in a depth, in a deeper way, and horizontally in more mitzvot. That's a Chanukah message that I thought was meaningful and beautiful. And now for the Parasha, the 6-hour portion. There's a lot happening. Vayigash Yehuda. Yehuda is going to approach Yosef, and I'm going to pass by Central Park's tree cutting episode right here. And we'll be quiet in a moment, or quieter anyway. So, in this week's Torah portion, we see that the brothers meet with Yosef, and he ends up revealing himself, and he says the first words, he says, Ani Yosef, he says, Ha'od Avi Chai, is my father still alive? He uses the word Chai, alive. Moving on, the Midrash tells us that in order to break the news carefully, so it shouldn't harm Yaakov, Serach Bas Asher, his granddaughter, played the harp and sang a song. So Yosef's still alive, Yosef's still alive, something like that, probably not in English, and slowly broke the news to him. When Yaakov heard that Yosef was alive, he said, "Oh, Yosef," he said, "Yosef beni chai, my son Yosef is alive. Eilech ve'erenu b'terem amut. I will go and I will see him before I die." Says the Rebbe, Yosef beni chai. When Yaakov said Yosef is still alive, he wasn't only talking about the physical life. Of course, that was essential and important. But Yaakov was also celebrating, joyful, jubilating about Yosef's being spiritually alive, being truly alive. Because the Torah is called Torah Chaim, the Torah of life. Says the Rebbe that when Yaakov said, Yosef beni Chai, my son Yosef in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, in the most decadent place of the world, with the least morality, he's living a Jewish lifestyle. He's a tzaddik, he's known to be a righteous person. And he raised a family, his children, who were all as observant as you can be in those days. Says the Rebbe, Yaakov said, Yosef beni Chai. Yosef, my son, is alive. He's living with Judaism. He's alive physically, but even more important, spiritually. Says the Rebbe that the Baal Shem Tov's successor, the Maggid of Mezrich, he took a verse in the Torah that has the same word of Chai, the Chai Bahem, and you should live with them. Now in the Torah it says you should live with the mitzvot. And from this, the Jewish law extrapolates that if it comes to a situation, a challenge, in which a person's life is in danger at the expense of a mitzvah, then, generally speaking, we sacrifice the mitzvah for the life. So we don't observe the mitzvah or do what we need to do to save the life. Aside from three. There are three cardinal sins that for which we're supposed to die instead of break the law. And those are idol worship, adultery, and murder. Okay, so aside from all three, so there are 613 mitzvos, 610 of them, v'chai bahem. We're supposed to live with the mitzvot and not die for them. Fine. What's the Hasidic perspective? The Maggid of Mezrich says, v'chai bahem means that not only do you live with the mitzvot, but you bring life into the mitzvah. V'chai bahem. You bring life in them, in the parchment of the tefillin or the mezuzah, in the wax of the candle, in the food of the kosher food, in the time of Shabbos and Yom Tov. Whenever you observe a mitzvah, you're transforming the physical, the material, into spiritual. You're infusing it with life. So, says the Rebbe, that Yaakov, when he said, Yosef beni chai, Yosef, my son, lives, he wasn't only referring to his son Yosef, the son of his wife Rachel. All the Jewish people are called Yosef. And the Rebbe quoted a pasuk that says that we're all called Yosef. And so too we all, in our exile, in our Egypt, we also need to chai, we need to live. Live not just materially and physically, but live with our Judaism enthusiastically. Says the Rebbe that when Yaakov, little joke I heard from Rabbi Gordon, you'll hear it on Chabad.org's Chitas app. Great way to learn the daily Chumash. So somebody needed to hire a professional in a Fortune 500 company, and 3 people are in the waiting room, calls them in one at a time. The first one's a mathematician. He asks him, sir, sit down, tell me, what is 2 plus 2? The mathematician says 4. The boss to be says, are you sure? He says, yes. Is it always 4? 100%. He says, okay, thank you, goodbye. Then he goes on. The next one is an accountant. He says, sir, sit down. What is 2 plus 2? He says, 4. So he asks the accountant, are you sure it's 4? He says, yes. Is it always 4? Give or take 10%. Then he says, thank you. Then he asks the economist, he says, what is 2 plus 2? He says, 4. Are you sure it's 4? Yes. Is it always 4? Goes to the door, closes the door, pulls down the drapes, turns off the light, and he says, what would you like it to be? So, in this week's Torah portion, as Yaakov is entering Egypt, going to tour Egypt to see his son, to meet his son who he hasn't seen for 22 years, the Torah says that there's a mix-up with the numbers, seemingly. Shalom.
Shalom.
Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. Jews in the park. So, the Torah talks about 70 people who entered Egypt. There were 70 people who entered Egypt, but then the Torah, if you count the numbers, there are only 69. So, the Midrash, Rashi, and the Torah itself explains that there were 69 people who traveled into Egypt, but the 70th one was born in between as they were entering the gates of Egypt. As they were entering Bein HaChomot, between the gates of Egypt, a baby was born. Who was that baby? Yocheved. Yocheved, one little girl. She was born. Now, Yocheved turned out to be a very special woman. She was the mother of Moses, his brother Aaron, and their sister Miriam. The Rebbe says that she merited mothering these great people and iconic images in our world, because when Pharaoh decreed that all the boys should be thrown into the Nile, Shiva techayena et hayeladim, She made them live. She established life in them. She raised them to be Jewish children. She raised, the Rebbe said, an army, Tzivot Hashem, an army of God. And therefore she merited to have Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Now Moshe was obviously the greatest leader who ever lived, the one who took us out of Egypt, spoke the greatest prophet, he spoke to God face to face. And he was also the father of all the Levites, the tribe of Levi. Aaron was the father of all the Kohanim, all the priests. Miriam, their sister, was the mother, the ancestor of the Davidic dynasty of King David, from whom Mashiach will come. So, Yocheved was one rockin' girl. And Yocheved was a little baby. She was born right there at the gates of Egypt. Says the Rebbe, Yaakov couldn't enter Egypt without Yocheved. Yaakov couldn't enter Egypt without all 70 souls with whom he went, because they represented all of the future of the Jewish people, but also, and more important, they represented the tools and the power and the energy with which to combat what was going to happen in the future. See, Yocheved, that's this little girl Yocheved, she was the answer to the Egyptian slavery and the future of the Jewish people, with Moses being the leader who took them out of exile, and King David, from whom Mashiach will come to take us out of exile. So the Rebbe learns from here, he says that just like God wouldn't let Yaakov, enter Egypt without all the tools he needs, without the fortification that he needs to survive and thrive, the exile of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, so too us, me and you, here and now. God never puts us in situations before he provides us with the power to overcome, with the power to survive, and the power to thrive. He provides the solution before the problem, before the challenge. So those are some beautiful lessons that I share with you today. You can share them with others and illuminate their spot in this world, illuminate the darkness, and let's keep Chanukah alive forever. V'yantif and happy Hey Teves. God bless.